My thanks to Jason Fitzpatrick for his excellent article and the catalyst for this video. You'll find his article at the link listed. First, here's why you might not want to replace your ISP's equipment. I personally think people should be using their own network equipment in place of the equipment supplied to them by their internet service provider, and the rest of this article will extensively detail why. But before we dig into why we favor off-the-shelf network hardware over ISP-supplied network hardware, let's discuss why you may wish to use ISP-supplied gear despite the reasons outlined below. For some people, there simply isn't an overly compelling reason to upgrade. Maybe your ISP includes the Wi-Fi router in your internet package with no additional fees, and you might consider it good enough until you run into a situation where you need more features or Wi-Fi coverage. If you only use your setup for a small number of devices that are used relatively close to the router, like the smart TV in your living room, your phone, and sometimes a laptop on your couch nearby, keep the router from your ISP. There's also something to be said for the renter-landlord model of "this isn't my problem, this is your problem," in that if the modem, router, or both fail, you're not on the hook to repair or replace them. You can place a service call, have the company test your equipment, and ultimately swap them out with your ISP for a replacement. So sometimes, especially in cases like being the tech support for a relative, it's okay to use the basic ISP stuff and let it all be the ISP's problem if anything goes wrong. I think there are plenty of good reasons to skip the bargain bin equipment your ISP hands out and go with something more sophisticated. Number 1, you can save money by purchasing your own modem and router. When the Television Viewer Protection Act of 2019 went into effect in the U.S. at the end of 2020, it made it illegal for ISPs to charge you an equipment rental fee even if you were using your own equipment. Over the course of 2 years, rental fees add up to between $120 and $480, which is more than enough to buy an excellent budget Wi-Fi router on the low end and a premium Wi-Fi router or mesh router setup on the high end. Be aware that in some cases you cannot buy your own modem and instead have to put up with the ISP-supplied modem router combo. Number 2, off-the-shelf routers offer better range and coverage. Some combination units from some ISPs aren't awful, especially if you only use them for a small apartment without many devices. AT&T's popular combination fiber gateway modem and Wi-Fi router, the BGW320, for example, is a perfectly serviceable Wi-Fi 6 router. But even in cases like the BGW320, where the gear might be okay for a small apartment with a modest network load, you'll quickly find the router lacking in a larger home, a home packed with Wi-Fi devices or both. Off-the-shelf Wi-Fi routers have more powerful hardware, and in the case of mesh systems, are extensible so that you can position the individual Wi-Fi mesh nodes for optimal coverage. Some ISPs offer Wi-Fi extenders and mesh platforms, but you get stuck paying a rental fee or overpaying for hardware that isn't as good as the stuff you could buy. Number 3, you get more frequent firmware updates and better security. Saving money and getting better Wi-Fi coverage are sexy arguments that practically make themselves. We'll admit that firmware and router security updates aren't quite as exciting. But given how much we do online now and how tempting of a target residential gateways are for people, router and home network security matters, and ISP supplied hardware doesn't have a fantastic track record. While all routers will eventually become obsolete and stop receiving firmware updates from their manufacturers, at least the manufacturers of off-the-shelf routers do a better job of staying on top of things than ISPs do. There is no guarantee that your off-the-shelf router will have every bug patched immediately, but the chances of a relatively new router getting routine security updates are much higher than that of hardware supplied to you by your ISP getting updates. Number 4, you'll have improved guest network settings. Guest networks are great, so great in fact, we think you should turn your router's guest network on right now. Guest networks also make your home network less vulnerable. While more and more ISPs supplied Wi-Fi routers and gateways support guest networks, the guest network settings are usually bare bones if they are present at all. Most ISP routers often limit the guest network to only the 2.4 gigahertz band. If you want a more advanced guest network experience to provide a better use experience for your guests and access advanced features to tweak the guest network, you're just out of luck. Number 5, off-the-shelf routers have better support for multiple SSIDs. Let's say you want to set up your home network, so there is your primary network name, your service set identifier, a secondary network just for your smart home and Internet of Things gear, and then a guest network. On ISP supplied gear, you're almost always out of luck and forced to use the 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz bands in a suboptimal way. If you have a dual band router with a separate guest network, you might be able to wrestle things into shape. But that will require taking the 5 gigahertz band for your primary SSID, the 2.4 gigahertz band for your secondary SSID, and then the guest network most likely limited to the 2.4 gigahertz band. Number 6, you get features like quality of service, VPNs, and more. ISP supplied Wi-Fi routers are pretty bare bones. They work, although based on general consumer grumbling, nowhere near as well as people would like, but typically a bare bones minimum level with no bells and whistles. Even something as trivial as changing the DNS servers your router uses, which is a common thing people do for increased speed, privacy, or both, isn't an option on the majority of your ISP-supplied Wi-Fi routers. Number 7, better parental controls. If you want parental controls, you're almost always out of luck with ISP-supplied equipment. Search your ISP's help file for parental controls, and you'll usually find ultra-basic options like how to block individual domains or a link to buy a product or service to provide online monitoring for your children. For parents who want router-based parental control with the ability to turn off internet access to devices on a schedule, limit access to content, and so on, you need better hardware than your ISP offers. Number 8, you have total control over the equipment. If you own your own router and network hardware, you have total control over it. Your ISP can't use your router as part of a free Wi-Fi for customers project, separate networks, or not. That doesn't sit well with many people. They also can't access your home network or make any changes because you control all the hardware. If you switch ISPs, you can simply slap a new modem on to link your existing router and Wi-Fi gear to the new provider. No threat of fees if you don't turn your hardware in on time or wasting time reconfiguring your whole home network. At the end of the day, you own the hardware and can resell it, give it to a friend or relative when you upgrade to a new Wi-Fi router, or do whatever you wish with it. Upgrades from your ISP are quite difficult to come by unless you're upgrading to a better, more expensive plan. Ultimately, the choice is yours. Stay safe, stay secure. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye, and thanks for watching.